Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Module 8, Lesson 2, Day 2, where we finish up our Module 8, Lesson 2 course arc and notebook and kind of finish reviewing for the quiz, right? Because every question we ask and answer on the course arc goes into the question bank for the Lesson 2 quiz. So let's get started. I need you guys to open up your Module 8 Lesson 2 notebook and your course arc. This is the ones that we started on Monday, the 30th. Some reminders. Your Module 7 project actually closes today, so make sure you get that turned in. The Module 8 Lesson 1 will close this Friday, and the Module 8 Lesson 2, the one we are currently working on, is due on this Friday. And then don't forget, on the next class, we are going to begin our Module 8 project over a cashless society. So that'll be tomorrow in class on February 2nd. So hopefully you guys have your course arcs and your notebooks open. Let's go to the course arc. And so we are at Aid and Alliances. That's the next section that we are on. And basically it talks about governments extend foreign aid to other countries for humanitarian reasons. We're trying to help them out. They've had some massive thing take place and they need help. For developmental, and those are definitely in our lesser developed countries. And that could be, foodstuffs, it could be, equipment, people to help them learn how to farm or whatever it is that they need, right? And then finally, political. And, coming out of World War II, we were absolutely just afraid of communism spreading. And so we were giving aid to all of these countries, trying to, keep them from turning to communism. That's the whole idea of the domino theory. If one country falls, all of the ones near it will fall as well. So if we can stop these couple of countries from turning communism, the rest of them hopefully won't as well. The organizations that we use to help solve these issues require either aid or security, and basically are created through formal agreements between their governments to work for specific purposes. Some countries participate in providing military forces to help, while others provide food or medical supplies. And right here on the link, if it says view peacekeeping or different peacekeeping missions, if you click on this link, which is what we're going to be using to help us with the question that we're doing in our notebook. It's the United Nations peacekeeping, and it talks about what peacekeepers are. And then this is the area of the operations we're going to look at for our questions. But let's go back to the course arc. And so the Court of Appeals were created in Congress in 1891. They were basically viewed as gatekeepers for the Supreme Court to relieve the burden of hearing appeals from district courts. We have a lot of different types of courts that are part of this. And a lot of these handle like special courts of appeals. So that could be anything involving like our military and such. We do have a quick video that I'm going to play talking about UN peacekeeping, and then we'll go into our notebook. Okay, so let me mute my mic and I'll play the quick video. Okay, so what you saw in some of the peacekeeping missions when they were talking about humanitarian, um, clearing landmines, helping them drill and get access to clean water. A big thing in Latin America and in Africa is the netting and things that go around like beds and stuff because of malaria from mosquitoes. So all of those types of things are all part of what they call peacekeeping missions, right? Trying to keep everything going. The more stable a country is, maybe the less likely it will be to engage in war, kind of idea. All right, so no questions in this part of the course arc, but we do have our notebook that we have to go through. And then, of course, we also have our rubric on here. So for aid and alliances, it says select a peacekeeping mission and fill in the chart. And to get the full marks, you have to have all 7 areas of the chart need to be filled out. So let's go to our notebook, which I've got this right here. And then remember that page that I showed you, it said pick a peacekeeping mission. And so you have all of these places. Now it says 4. Where this 4 is, there's actually 4 peacekeeping missions going on, operations going on in that area. You have them throughout Africa. You have them in the former Bosnia-Herzegovina, Czechoslovakia area. So you have all of these, and all you do is you pick one. So I'm just going to select see all, so you can see all of the ones that are on that map. And these are all of the current operations. Okay, see all of those right there. And you click on one of them and you get the information. Okay, so let's see. I don't know. There's some, let me see. Is it the one in the Middle East that I clicked on? I don't remember which one I clicked on. Yeah, I believe this is the one. Yes. Okay. So when you look on here, you have a fact sheet and it gives you where it's located, what it's called. So the UNTSO, which is United Nations Truce Supervision Organization, it's in the Middle East. The headquarters is at the Government House in Jerusalem. It was established in May of 1948, and it is ongoing. And in fact, it is probably one of the longest peacekeeping missions. In fact, it was the first ever peacekeeping mission operation established by the United Nations, right? So let's look at the chart that you need to fill out. So the name of the mission, the UN TSO, right? United Nations Truce Supervision Organization. It's located in Jerusalem. It began in May of 1948, and it is still ongoing. And then some more questions that you have on here is like, what is the goal of the mission? What countries are contributing? Current strength of operations, and the number of fatalities. So we go back to the site. Okay. Let's see. When it talks about strength, there are 377 total personnel. Contributing countries, here's the top 10 countries that I've listed on there. Fatalities, there's 52 fatalities. It talks about like funding, other documents. When you are looking at this, when it talks about the goal of the mission, which was the very beginning one, it just talks about they were trying to basically, they're staying in there. They try to monitor ceasefires. They try and supervise armistice agreements. They try and prevent isolated incidents from escalating. They assist other UN peacekeeping operations in the region. That's what they're trying to do. Okay. There's our countries, 377 total personnel as of June 2022, and the number of fatalities is 52. So based on the rubric, all the parts have been filled in. Okay. And that came from this page right here, which remember is this right here. That hyperlink right there takes you to that page. Okay, so let's move on to our next page in the course arc, which is international organizations. And so it starts talking about the United States began providing financial aid after World War II through what became known as the Marshall Plan. It was basically in response to the large-scale destruction of Europe and its financial collapse after World War II. Other than Pearl Harbor, for us, all of the war took place in Japan, in the islands in the Pacific on that side, as well as throughout Europe. Most of the countries have been bombed and destroyed, okay? And so basically, we wanted to help Europe rebuild after the war. Were we doing this out of the goodness of our hearts? Not really. Remember, coming out of World War II, we have Russia, which had turned into the Soviet Union, and they were communist. They grabbed all the countries that were right there along the border with the rest of Central and Western Europe. They put up what became termed as the Iron Curtain, if you guys remember that. And all of those countries became satellite countries or buffer countries. They all became communist. And we are going through, coming out of World War II, we have this fear of communism. It's going to lead to McCarthyism, all that crazy stuff. And so our thought process was, if we give them money and we help them rebuild, they're not going to turn to the Soviet Union and accept their help and become communist. And so that was kind of like the basic idea of all of this. We were just absolutely afraid of the spread of communism. A lot of international organizations involve governments around the world, people working together, trying to solve problems at cross-country borders. We have like NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and then these are all the countries that belong to NATO, all 30 members. And if you look at the year that they began, and we can click on this, and it takes us to the NATO, right? And it takes us to member countries, and you can go by date, when did they start, all the way from Belgium to North Macedonia, kind of thing. And in fact, 2 days before the Ukraine was supposed to become a member of NATO is when Russia attacked them. But that's a whole nother story. So back in our course arc, we have a video on international organizations. Then we're going to answer a couple of questions, and then we'll do our what we need to do in our notebook. So let me mute myself and I'll play the video.
Secretary of Treasury. Deals with money. Secretary. Hi, welcome back to Mr. Raymond's Civic COC Academy, where today we will be looking at international organizations like the Red Cross and the World Trade Organization. Now, last time we looked at foreign policy and how the president and Congress deal with countries around the world. So if you haven't watched that, be sure to go back to our channel and check it out. There are several international organizations that the United States government and individual Americans participate in that you will need to know for your exam. And these include the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, NAFTA, and NATO that we talked about before. But before we jump into those, a reminder to teachers that this PowerPoint lesson plans, activities, and worksheets are all available at Teachers Pay Teachers. Just search for Mr. Raymond's Civic COC Academy. So let's start with our first one. You're probably familiar with the United Nations. This is an organization made up of close to 200 countries from around the world. The UN, with its headquarters in New York City, was designed to be a place where countries could come to discuss their issues without resorting to violence and war, which has plagued our planet for far too long. Maintaining peace and building friendships is the #1 goal of the UN, as well as providing a forum where countries could gather to discuss global issues. The General Assembly is the gathering of all of these countries. This is the giant room where speeches are given and they can vote on issues. The UN also has what is known as the Security Council. This group of countries decides what to do when 2 or more countries are waging war or are on the verge of fighting. There are 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, and these are the big guys: the United States, Britain, Russia, China, and France. Now, in addition to the 5 members, 10 additional countries join the permanent members for 2-year terms, making a total of 15 countries on the Security Council, deciding what to do about fights. The Security Council will try to broker ceasefires between 2 sides. They can pass sanctions, which, as you know from our last video, is when you block trade with another country as a punishment. They can send troops or observers, and if worse comes to worse, they can use military force. Now, here is a map of where UN peacekeepers have been sent in the past, a lot in Africa and Asia and the Middle East. The big 5 permanent members have a veto power, which means that one member can stop the entire council from taking action against a country. And this has come up recently during the Syrian civil war, in which Russia and China, who are allies with Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad, have been able to stop the other members from stepping in to deal with the Syrian leader, who is accused of using biological weapons against his own people. However, the UN is not all about fights. The United Nations has a program called UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Emergency Fund. UNICEF's goal is to help children around the world. They collect funds to distribute emergency relief from famine and poverty and disease. UNICEF also provides education programs in areas where there are no schools. Now, I remember as a kid during Halloween when kids would carry around boxes to collect change for UNICEF. I probably should have joined them. So while UNICEF is part of the United Nations, they operate semi-independently and rely on fundraising. So when you think of UNICEF, think of it as a great UN program to help kids around the world. The UN also has the International Court of Justice, usually just referred to as the World Court. It's located in the Netherlands in a town called The Hague. And here is where countries can settle disputes in a court of law, as well as a place where war criminals and rulers who have done terrible things to their people can be tried for their crimes. The problem is sometimes getting these bad guys all the way to Europe to face trial, as there's not really a police force to go out and get them. As more and more countries interact with one another, people are looking for the International Court of Justice to play a bigger role in the future of our global world. A lot of people, however, criticize the United Nations as being weak and unable to stop wars. And for that reason, our next group continues to play a big role in foreign conflicts: NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is a defensive treaty, or really a military alliance, between the United States, Canada, and 25 European countries. We covered NATO in our last video. This treaty and international organization is based on the idea of collective security. The countries in this organization basically agree to combine their militaries and announce to the world that if a country messes with one of its members, the other countries will come to their defense. Now, NATO was created after World War II, at the beginning of the Cold War, mostly between the United States and their Western European allies, and their new enemy, Communist Russia, now the Soviet Union. We'll look at the Cold War in our next video, in which you can see on this map, a line was drawn through Europe with NATO on one side, and the Soviet Union with the countries they controlled in Eastern Europe on the other side. While the two sides never directly fought one another,
All right, guys, so remember when I was just talking about like the Iron Curtain and the buffer countries? So this would be, the Soviet Union. And then here would be like the Iron Curtain, as it was termed, and the buffer nations there. And then, of course, all of the democratic countries that we were funneling money through, from the Marshall Plan, trying to keep, communism from spreading. This is your visual that kind of goes along with that.
The world lived in fear of NATO and the Soviet Union going to war, and when I say NATO, I mostly mean the United States. With the collapse of the Soviet Union around 1990, former Soviet states like Poland and Croatia have joined NATO, making present-day Russia feel more threatened by NATO. NATO has sent troops and undertaken military operations in Afghanistan, Kosovo, Iraq, and Africa. Of course, the United States, with by far the most advanced military in the world, makes up the bulk of NATO forces and operations. And a lot of these wars or conflicts are considered to be strictly US wars, but as you can see with this German troop in Iraq, these are actually NATO operations. Our next group, the Red Cross, is an international organization that developed out of war. You've probably seen the Red Cross in your neighborhood, or if your town has dealt with a flood or a hurricane. Very often they have blood drives to use during times of emergencies, but the Red Cross is an international organization. The Red Cross and Red Crescent, if located in a Muslim country, is an example of an NGO or a non-governmental organization. And that's a phrase you need to know for your exam. An NGO means that this group is not tied to any country. This allows it to operate freely throughout the world. They provide a lot of emergency relief, such as food, water, and medical supplies for those whose homes or towns have been destroyed by a disaster or by war. They also monitor the treatment of prisoner of wars and go to conflicts to make sure that no war crimes are taking place. In fact, as I said, the Red Cross began as an organization to help those who were wounded during wars. The big Red Cross was a sign that these were not soldiers and shouldn't be shot at. Part of why it's important for the Red Cross to be an NGO is that they remain neutral and help wounded from both sides of a war. And since they are neutral, governments are more likely to let them come into their countries to help. While the headquarters of the International Red Cross is in Geneva, Switzerland, there are branches of the Red Cross in countries throughout the world. In addition to the Red Cross, there are many NGOs dedicated to helping people around the world. There is Doctors Without Borders, providing free emergency health care in disaster areas, Oxfam, fighting famine and disease, Amnesty International, who speak out for human rights and political prisoners, and Save the Children, helping kids get healthcare and education. Our next group is an economic association. The WTO, or World Trade Organization, is made up of 162 countries around the world and was created with the goal of increasing free trade. Free trade means that countries will buy and sell goods from one another without placing taxes on imports. And this brings up a word that you need to know: tariffs. Tariffs are taxes on imports. Tariffs were used by countries for a long time to protect businesses and companies inside their country. This diagram shows how a tax on British cloth would protect American cloth makers by making the British product more expensive. And this is known as protectionism. Protectionism was practiced by the United States and countries around the world for a long time, but it seems to be a thing of the past. Today, we use the word globalization to describe how countries from all over the world trade with one another, and that is what the WTO is all about. The WTO is not without criticism. In fact, a protest in Seattle at a 1999 WTO conference led to a major riot. As some say, the WTO is more about helping large companies and corporations than it is about helping people. America has a similar agreement, which we covered last time, called NAFTA, or the North American Free Trade Agreement. This is an economic treaty between the United States, Canada, and...
Okay, so it's no longer called NAFTA. You can tell this is a little bit older video. It's now the US MCA, I believe. Yeah. So it's the United States, Mexico, Canada agreement is now what it is, but it started out as NAFTA.
Mexico, in which the three countries trade freely without taxing each other. And here's that word tariff again, which is a tax on imports. NAFTA is not without critics either. Here are some American auto workers protesting NAFTA as several car companies have moved factories to Mexico in search of cheaper labor. NAFTA, like the World Trade Organization, represents the challenge in America of keeping manufacturing jobs here versus our desire for cheap products. So keep in mind for international organizations, the ones that you need to know. The US are either members like they are in the UN, the WTO, NAFTA, and NATO, or they are impacted and participating groups such as NGOs like the Red Cross and Doctors Without Borders. And that's our brief look at international organizations. Up next,
All right, so that's the last thing that we wanted to watch, and we're talking about international organizations. Now we have a couple of questions on the course arc that we want to go through. So the first one is, what agreement initiated the provision for financial aid from the United States to its allies after World War II? Remember, that one was Marshall Plan after George Marshall, the guy who came up with it. And then the fear of financial destruction across Europe brought fears of the rise of communism to the vulnerable countries throughout Europe. And those were the two that we were worried about. Remember, those two will also show up on your quiz for your question bank. So let's go to our notebook for this. And this one is really simple. All you have to do is, it talks about NATO as an organization that has 30 members as part of its organization. Lists 3 members and the year they joined that are not the US or the UK. So we have our original countries that joined in 1949. Pick any of them. You know, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, France, Iceland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Norway, Portugal. You can grab our former USSR Iron Curtain countries. And so that would be Czechia, Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro. And then we have the latest one, which was North Macedonia in 2020. So any 3, as long as it's not the United Kingdom, as long as it's not the United States, any 3 countries out of those 30 with the date that they joined. That's all you have to do, and you get full credit for that one. So we're going to move on to our Google Map tours. So let's move to the actual course arc. And as always, right, we're going to click on the hyperlink, which takes us here. So the areas that we are looking at for our locations, location A would be United Nations, B would be NATO, C would be European Union, D would be the WHO or World Health Organization, and E would be the World Bank. You click on each one of these and it gives you information in regards to the countries that founded the United Nations, or the fact that it's known for its humanitarian missions around the world, etc. And you do that for each and every one of these. You have NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You have the European Union, the EU. You have the WHO or World Health Organization, and then you have the World Bank. Okay, so all of these are going to be part of your Google Tours map. So you have United Nations. Here's a quick summary. NATO, EU, WHO, the World Bank, right? All of those in there, all 5 of them with 1 to 2 sentences apiece, get you full credit, as always, in our rubric. Okay, so let's go back to the course arc and let's do the matching portion, which can also show up on as questions on your quiz. So it says, founded to keep peace and develop friendly relationships around the world. And that would be our United Nations, right? Formed to protect member countries around the Atlantic Ocean in North America and Europe. Well, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO sounds right. Partnership between countries in Europe to avoid conflict and lead to interdependence. That's the European Union. Branch of the United Nations focused on improving healthcare around the world. Well, World Health Organization. And then created to provide money to the poor and middle income countries to build improvements. And that would be the World Bank. So hopefully you have all of that completed and answered on your notebook. I'm going to scroll down. And at this point, you should have everything answered in your course arc. So now you should be submitting your course arc. And then the last 2 pages in our course arc are going to go with the journal and the essential question in our notebook. So we're going to click on the journal page. And it talks about wars and political disruption overseas directly impact the United States and the American people. In the last century, the United States has fought 5 major wars and has contributed to several other disputes by providing funding or military needs. Now, remember, Ukraine is not in here. This is right prior to the Ukraine, okay? As president, the country is faced with tough situations every day and a limited budget to do so. While the public is not always previewed to the troubles ahead, the president and people working with the president make some major decisions every day that the public is not always happy about. Some decisions are a matter of national security, but which ones do you choose to act on? So your question prompt, okay? In your opinion, so you're going to do this based on what you think. You are going to rank the following actions from the highest priority to the lowest priority. So which is most important to which is least important. And then you're going to justify why you ranked them the way you did. So the items that we're going to rank are stop a dictator from developing nuclear weapons, give money to a poor country so it can vaccinate its citizens against a deadly disease, spend money to develop a new technology for our military, pressure another country to strengthen its laws against internet hacking, run television ads supporting a candidate in another country's presidential election, meaning running ads in that country, okay, not in our country, in their country. So when we go to our rubric, it says 3 to full paragraphs that use governmental vocabulary. It answers the journal prompt. I'm going to, it says 3 to 4 paragraphs, but if you look at the rubric, I didn't make it, but it says 2 full paragraphs. So we're going to go with that to get your full marks. So we come back to our notebook. And since it said 2 full paragraphs, we're going to rank these 5 from highest to lowest. So my first paragraph would be write a sentence ranking each of the given actions. Maybe you start off with the highest, most important. The first one that I'm going to rank as the highest being whatever, all the way down to your 5th or your lowest rank. Okay. Your second paragraph, explain why you ranked each of those actions the way you did. Explain it. And that's all you have to do. I'm going to put this one first in sentence form, right? This one the next, third, fourth, fifth. Those are 5 sentences minimum in your next paragraph. Okay, I chose this one as the highest one because I felt this was second highest because, and so on and so forth. This one I ranked last because I felt it wasn't the highest priority because, okay? And then finally, the last part of this is the last question as always. Give 1 full paragraph answering the question, what is the United States presence on the global stage? After everything you've read through in the course arc and what we've done in our notebook, what do you think the United States presence is on the global stage? And that is all you are doing. So at this point, between Monday and today, we have answered every question in the course arc for Module 8, Lesson 2. We've gone over every question in Module 8, Lesson 2 notebook. The only thing I haven't given you is specifically what order to rank and why on your journal. And I didn't give you an answer to the essential question because that was one you need to come up with on your own. But I've given you everything else from there. And because we actually went through every question in the course arc, we've been reviewing for your Module 8 Lesson 2 quiz. Now, don't forget, the review sheet, as always, will also be in this week's lesson recording page. Okay? As again, today the Module 7 finally closes. The First Amendment rights the students have. Your Module 8 Lesson 1 will close this Friday. So you're in your grace period on those two. Module 8 Lesson 2 is due this Friday, the one that we've been working on, but you're all going to get it turned in today anyway, and so you won't even have to worry about that. And then tomorrow in class, we'll begin the Module 8 project over a cashless society. And that is it for Module 8, Lesson 2, Day 2. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.